So like we talked about, at this point in the process, we are reading our research and making some notes and creating a bibliography to try to consolidate all of our thoughts about the topic and determine the angle for our essays. Part of that process is creating summary notes and reflecting on how useful each of your sources are to your main point. And what I mean by that is, how could you possibly use this source in your essay? There's a lot of different ways that you can use sources. So it's really important as you're reading them to think about how I could use this, because you're not going to be using your sources in terms of just like summarizing everybody's points of view. You actually need to use them strategically to prove the point that you have. And there's a couple key ways that you can do that. One way you can use sources is to provide background for the topic that you're looking at. So for example, one topic that at least one student is doing is the foster system and whether or not it works. So some important background for that topic would be, what is the foster system, how did it develop, and how is it supposed to work? That person would need to establish those things before they could go in and make a judgment about whether or not it works. Another topic that at least one person is doing is the treatment of Japanese Americans during World War II. So for some background there, we'd have to consider, what was the relationship between the U.S. and Japan in World War II? What were the internment camps, and what were some major conflicts that happened? So each of these people would have to have at least one source that discusses these things and to provide background to use in the paper. Another way to use a source is to support a point that you have. So for example, a lot of people are doing a topic about the death penalty. And maybe your main point would be that the death penalty is useful in some circumstances, but not in every circumstance. You would have to find some support, for example, of statistics, maybe some graphs, some charts that could show how the death penalty is used. And some of the Viewpoints articles would give a lot of really good support because they're already set up in a way that has pros and cons. All of those details will be useful to support that kind of a point. You can't just support a point with whatever you think. You actually have to have other data to support what you're saying. Another topic that is pretty common is the Great Depression and how it was caused. So one perspective could be the Great Depression was caused by economic failure and a lack of solid government intervention. So if you're looking for good support for that kind of a point, you could use economic analyses of the Great Depression then, as well as how the government has been involved in the economy since then. You could do some comparisons between then and now. You could use charts or graphs, and you can also look at speeches. Since you're considering a lack of solid government intervention, you could have some speeches from the presidents at the time and evaluate what kind of information they were giving to the people and if it was valid. A third way to use a source is to provide examples. Examples help to make your essay more realistic and to kind of show people how the point that you're making links back to them. All of your support should not be examples, but they can be very useful to kind of beef out the support that you're offering. So one topic that at least two people are doing is abortion. So in looking for examples, they could find some real life stories and kind of accounts of people who might have had an abortion. They can also look for scientific studies and experiments or court cases. There are multiple court cases about abortion, and so finding those court cases would be a really good way to provide a real life example. Another topic that at least one or two people are doing is drug abuse. And so some examples to look for there would be medical overviews of different types of drugs, and maybe conducting an interview with a doctor or a police officer who could give information about drug abuse and how it affects people. And then a fourth way to use a source is to provide another perspective. So one thing we've talked about is how if you provide multiple perspectives, your story and your essay actually becomes stronger, especially if you show how your point of view is stronger than another point of view. So one example could be somebody saying a military draft is never a good idea. They should still acknowledge other perspectives such that a military draft is a good idea or is sometimes a good idea. They shouldn't just talk about how it's never a good idea, because there's a lot of different viewpoints on that topic. Another topic that would require other perspectives would be the best way to treat depression is to affirm strengths and to be patient, because other people might say that, depression can be treated with medication and therapy. So it's important to acknowledge multiple perspectives, but also to show how yours is the strongest. So as you're writing your summary notes, including that 4 to 6 sentence summary, Keep in mind, thinking about how useful that source is to your topic. Use these 4 general categories to help you decide how you're going to use that source when you write your paper.